So yes, my name's Tim Grant, and I'm the director of the Aston Institute for Forensic Linguistics. And Megan asked me to deliver this talk with Fiona as part of the sort of subject knowledge strand of our talks for teachers. I guess this talk is mostly aimed at teachers of A-level students to give some indication of what we do in forensic linguistics. We do schools talks in individual schools sometimes, and quite often students want to run investigations in an area of forensic linguistics. They've heard about it. They might want to do something within the broadest area of forensic linguistics. So I've never worked in a school. I'm not an English teacher, so I don't claim to have the syllabus knowledge. So that'll be for you to make those kind of contacts with what we say. I'm going to speak quite fast. And that's because I want to get through quite a lot of stuff. This week and a couple of weeks ago, there was a BBC TV show in the daytime called Expert Witness, and this featured two of the cases that I was involved in. It's up on iPlayer now and will be for a year. So what I thought I would do is give some background to those cases. So in case you wanted to use they're 15-minute videos for each case, and it might make quite a nice classroom exercise in forensic linguistics if you wanted to introduce your students to that. I've got some references at the end, but I'm going to jump straight in. So I'm going to do a little bit about, sorry, I'm struggling now with my screens, about what forensic linguistics is. And we take quite a broad view of forensic linguistics. So our definition of forensic linguistics is it's an attempt to improve the delivery of justice through the analysis of language. And this is trying to get away from the idea that forensic linguistics is only about providing language evidence in courtrooms. We do a lot more than that. So there's an area which is sometimes referred to as language and law, which is the study of written legal texts. So we study the production and the texts themselves, to include wills and contracts, to include statutes, and we ask questions as to why the legal language is as it is, and whether it could be reformed. There's various plain language campaigns and so on. And as linguists, as people interested in the structure of English language, forensic linguistics includes that kind of study. We also study legal linguistic processes, everything from the linguistics of who can comprehend the police caution should you be arrested, through to linguistics in the context of the police interview, or we've got colleagues investigating emergency calls involving domestic violence or other crimes that might be going on in action in the background for the call handler, through to linguistics in the courtroom. How do lay witnesses and experts get questioned and cross-examined in the courtroom, and how those linguistic structures work, and how those linguistic interactions work. Finally, there's the sort of the classic area of forensic linguistics, which if you're into crime dramas, you might get featured in Line of Duty recently. There's a great Netflix series about the Unabomber investigation. The fictionalized accounts are fictionalized. You shouldn't take them as a record of the kind of thing we really do. But the idea that the linguist can help investigate texts to provide evidence into investigations or in civil cases, and sometimes take that as evidence to court. And within the idea of language as evidence, I tend to use the term investigative linguistics, or sometimes investigative forensic linguistics, to indicate the investigation of forensically interesting texts to aid investigation and or provide evidence. So that's just a little bit of definitional stuff. We're very happy to distribute these slides afterwards, or they'll be up on the recording, obviously, if you want to pick up any of these definitions. Okay, I'm going to talk through the two cases that were as seen on TV this last couple of weeks. So first of all, sorry, I missed my cue. This slide breaks down a bit about what investigative forensic linguistics is. And I'm going to be talking about an authorship analysis case and a determination of meaning case involving slang meanings. We do other stuff. So there are linguists who get involved in the definition of ordinary meaning in legal terms, and also pragmatic meaning. So what constitutes a threat? one of my most interesting cases in this area was something where a businessman said to another businessman, I can cause good things to happen to you. And I wrote a linguistic report as to how that could be heard as a threatening utterance. How can saying you can cause good things to happen become a threatening utterance? So we get involved in other kinds of meanings, but today I'm going to talk about a slang meaning case that I was involved in. And we do other things as well. There's all sorts of linguistic analyses we do. So I was involved in a case which involved a covert recording inside a car, and I did a kind of conversation analysis to show that one individual was never interrupted, that their topics were taken up, and so on, which seemed to indicate that they were the leader of that particular gang. So there's all sorts of ways in which linguistics or the study of language can offer evidence in court. Within the authorship analysis field, it might be a bit small. I've included this figure from a book of mine, but authorship analysis breaks down into three main areas. Comparative authorship analysis, where we're saying, are the texts which are under dispute or queried, can we say whether they're written by the suspect or perhaps by a witness? Sociolinguistic profiling. So I know in the A-level syllabus, there's quite a lot of interest in language and gender and how language can be gendered. So if you're doing a profiling case, the question is, can you read a text and predict whether it was written by a man or a woman? It's a reversal of that kind of knowledge we have about how language can be gendered. And then author search type cases around if we have a short text from someone, can we search the internet and find other writings that they've had? So there's different forms of authorship analysis which we engage in. And these areas kind of sum up what we mean when we talk about investigative forensic linguistics. So I am now going to go on to talk about an authorship analysis case, which is a text messaging case that I was involved in. And this is the case that was on TV this last week. I'm going to talk about the Amanda Burks case on the right of this slide, but we have a history of involvement in SMS text messaging cases, and this has evolved into looking at WhatsApp messages and other messaging apps. And quite often our evidence has been used in what are called no body found murder inquiries. So this is where there's a missing person inquiry, and perhaps the phone of the person continues to send messages to families and friends, and yet they begin to believe that some harm has come to the person. And so are able to show that in these cases that the messages that seem to provide an alibi that someone is alive are unlikely to have been written by the person whose phone it is, and perhaps more likely to be consistent with a suspect. So these are the kind of cases which we've done in the past. And then the case which is featured on that TV show is this Amanda Burks case, which I'm able to talk about because the family is very keen that we're able to talk about it. They said quite explicitly that they want the work we did to be publicized and used in our teaching and our research to further these kind of cases. So Amanda Burks sadly died on the 17th of January 2009. And she apparently died in a house fire. There'd been a history of domestic violence with her husband, but her husband, Christopher, phoned in the house fire to the fire brigade and said that his wife, Amanda, was asleep in an upstairs attic bedroom. He then entered the house, which was on fire, to rescue his children, but couldn't rescue Amanda. Because of the history, the police were almost from the off suspicious of Christopher Burks. And as the forensic evidence came in, there was a sort of circumstantial case that suggested that his story didn't add up. So there was forensic science evidence that Amanda might have been dead at the time of the fire. There was insufficient carbon monoxide in her lungs. She was tucked up in bed with no attempt to escape. And there was disputable fiber evidence that she seemed to be wearing outside clothes whilst tucked up in bed. So this is building a case, but it's all a little bit circumstantial. There was evidence of some timing as well. So Amanda had been sending text messages throughout the day of the 17th of January through to about 8 in the evening, 10 to 8 in the evening. And so this, and from about 7:30 in the evening, Christopher Burks was with people and was seen and had a strong alibi. And then the fire itself occurred at about 11 in the evening as he came home from the pub, I think. Now, Christopher said that Amanda had been at home working on a joint business. They ran fitting satellite TV aerials and was pottering about the house, calling out work teams to different jobs and doing the accounts. But they had a domestic burglar alarm at home, and that burglar alarm recorded no movements in the house during the day. So the story that Christopher said he thought was happening couldn't have been true. I'm going to talk about the text messaging because this is my part of the case. What we did is we got the police to collect text messages that had been sent from Amanda's phone and sent from Christopher's phone. Both phones weren't available to the police. Amanda's phone had been destroyed in the fire and was recovered, but was completely burnt out and no forensic evidence could be got from it. Christopher's phone, he said he'd lost it and he couldn't produce it for the police, which only added to the suspicion of the police. So what the police did is they went around knocking on doors of work colleagues and family and friends of the couple and said, had you received any messages from them in the last 3 months? And this is what we'd asked them to do. And they managed by doing that to collect about 200 messages from each of them. And we did a simple vocabulary analysis. And this is something you can do in your classes. It works. You can get your students to analyze their own messaging from one to another to see if you can pick out an individual's language style. And what we did in this analysis, I'm going to produce a table of figures for you here, but you don't have to read the individual figures, and this isn't a maths talk. You may be relieved to hear. Well, what I did is I just produced vocabulary counts for all the vocabulary across the 400 messages, 200 from Amanda and 200 from Christopher. And then I selected vocabulary items that occurred more than 10 times in the total set of known messages. So you have to have repetition to set up a pattern. And then I selected those words which would occur on a 2-to-1 basis for one of Christopher Burks or Amanda Burks. So twice as often in Christopher Burks than Amanda Burks, or the other way around. And as you can see, some of these terms like with, W-I-V for the word with, this is quite old-fashioned language now. We don't tend to use so many of these abbreviations anymore, but there's new abbreviations we use. But with was used only by Christopher Burks and never by Amanda Burks. But they both used to some degree the abbreviation of just using W for with. So this usage was 3/4 of the time Amanda Burks and then only about 1/4 of the time Christopher Burks. So you can see what we've got in this chart is a separation of the two language styles between the two individuals. And it's quite, there's overlap between their styles, but there's also separation across these 18 features. And what's quite important in terms of the forensic science of this is I didn't pick the 18 features, they arose out of the data in quite a systematic way. So what I'm going to show you next are some slides that we prepared for the jury. Okay, so this is messages sent from Christopher Burks' phone on the 16th of January 2009, which is the day before Amanda Burks died. And what you see is down the left-hand side, I have the features that are typical of Amanda Burks' style, and they're represented in blue, and down the right-hand side, represented in red, are the features typical of Christopher Burks' style. So we have the use of these digit substitutions here and here, and the commas are something that is predominantly used by Christopher Burks and rarely used by Amanda Burks. And when is a feature that is already, we know, is used sometimes by Christopher Burks, but is mostly used by Amanda Burks. So we've got a blue feature there, but you can see that there's plenty of red on this slide for the day before the fire, where these are undisputed messages. And we can look at the same messages for Amanda Burks' phone the day before the fire, and we see that they mostly contain Amanda Burks features, and in this set of messages, certainly there's no Christopher Burks features. So this is the method. This is a pictorial method of what we do. We're doing some statistics in the background, but we try not to trouble the jury too much with statistical methods because you get them in tangles if you do. So we go on to the day of the fire. When I did the analysis, I had to treat as disputed anything after midnight on the 17th of January. Once I'd submitted the analysis, it turned out that Amanda had been seen alive at about 10:30 in the morning. So in fact, the time frame that we're looking at is after 10:30, but I didn't know that at the time of the analysis. So we can see already we've got little bits of red here. We've got this 4A, which previously has only been used by Christopher Burks, and this occurs at 11:39. But there are still quite a lot of Amanda Burks features in this. The commas are a shared feature that are predominantly Christopher Burks. So you look at this slide and you think, well, there's some Christopher Burks features there, but if I'm asking who wrote these messages from Amanda's phone, there's at least a chance that it was Amanda Burks. After 12:40, the analysis all shows Christopher Burks all the way through for the rest of the day. So this is the kind of way we can present this to the jury to show that the statistical analysis is convincing in a visual form, that these messages, these later messages in the day sent from Amanda's phone, are more likely to be consistent with Christopher Burks's historic texting style and inconsistent with Amanda Burks's historic texting style. When you're working as an expert witness for a court case, you've got to be really careful about what you know you can say and what you can't. And we don't go further than talking about the distinctiveness between the two writers and the consistencies and the inconsistencies. I cannot make an absolute identification from this analysis that Christopher Burks wrote these messages. I can say, I can produce a likelihood, a statistical likelihood for each of the messages that it's much more likely to be Christopher Burks than Amanda Burks. But it's important to leave to the jury that final determination of the issue of who wrote the messages, because that's their job rather than my job as an expert witness. The outcome of this case was Christopher Burks, in the end, faced with all the evidence against him, pleaded guilty just on the morning of the trial. In the British system, if the trial has started, you don't get any discount on your sentence, is the way that it's phrased, for pleading guilty in advance. If you plead guilty the earliest opportunity at the time you're charged, just an early appearance in court, then you can get a discount on your sentence. And the last chance you have for getting any discount is before the trial. So he left it to the last minute, but pleaded guilty in the last minute, and he got a life sentence for the murder of his wife and the endangerment of his children and of the fire officers. It set his house on fire with his children asleep inside. So not a pleasant story, but and he's still in prison, which isn't true of the people in the next case I want to cover. I'm going to go pretty fast through this, which is how we determine meaning in court. So this is an internet relay chat between Snoopy Montana at the top and Maniac. And this is interesting stuff because it gets into areas of varieties of English. And as linguists, we work with, so it's moved in terminology. It used to be called multicultural London English. And now some people would call it British urban English. And there are other terms as well to refer to, it's often a street slang which borrows from a lot of waves of immigration. So people tend to think that this is only from Jamaican English, but there's actually many more waves of immigration than just Jamaican English in these kind of slangs. And this is a case that what's in question is whether this phrase, "I'll get a fiend to duppy her den," could amount to a conspiracy to murder. And what had happened is that a young woman had been attacked in London and there was an attempted murder of her. And she was the girlfriend of Brandon Jolie, who had they both were grime music musicians, and he went under the name of Maniac. So Brandon Jolie was her boyfriend, and she became pregnant, and he wanted to have an abortion, and she refused to do so. So the solution was discussed between him and Kingsley Ogden Daly, and then there was an attack on her, which amounted to an attempted murder. She wasn't killed. She was attacked, but is living safely and had her baby. So how do you determine the linguistic question is, as a linguist, how do you determine the meaning of a term like this? And it's not enough to get up in court and say, I know what this means. It means this because I've studied this. You've got to be able to demonstrate meaning in the courtroom. And the main way we demonstrate meaning is by using corpus methods. So what I did, you've got to find a relevant corpus to do this. And what I did is there's an online bulletin board called Grime Music Forum. And I went and I scooped all the messages I could off Grime Music Forum and created a corpus out of that, looking for the term duppy and its use as a verb. I found some examples of duppy as a noun, because a duppy in Jamaican is a ghost, as one of the, I've got even this definition example, which is very useful. But does to duppy someone, they mean to turn someone into a ghost. So, and I found one example of duppy being used as a verb. This was a title to a music video where the MC on the stage shouted off stage to his colleague, pass me a lemon, I'll duppy the crowd. And what he was saying is the crowd's going wild here. And the joke I use with my students, being into lame jokes, is a bit like in the Royal Shakespeare Company, is someone coming off the stage and saying, we're slaying them tonight, darling. It's a figurative use, but it's nevertheless the same as using duppy as a verb, even if it's been used figuratively in this video. So we can use these corpus methods. There are dictionaries of slang, and Green's Dictionary of Slang. If you're looking at varieties of English, there's an online version of Green's Dictionary of Slang, which is just an absolutely fantastic resource. And he also produces timelines of slang terms back to the centuries. And it's really interesting if you want to do investigations into varieties of English and slang to use these kind of resources. Everyone's heard of urbandictionary.com. I try not to go to court quoting Urban Dictionary, I have to say. Okay, so that is the kind of methods we use to determine meaning in court. And I'm going to skip over my prison phone call, which is another example of slang, and go straight to the end to see if people have any questions of the kind of things I've been talking about. I'm going to leave that up. There's a textbook there, which is, I think, quite a easy read if you're interested in forensic linguistics. And I don't think it would be too hard for reasonably strong A-level students to have a look at. And certainly if you're interested in forensic linguistics as teachers, this is one that you might dip into. The Expert Witness Show is up on iPlayer at the moment. And as a research institute, we run events. And I just also wanted to mention, I did create, there's a teaching organisation called the Pixel Club that some of you might be members of. And I did create a work package with them aimed at years 7 to 9, so that younger work group, looking at a classroom analysis of their own phone messages and other things. So so if you want to get ideas of how to bring this stuff into your classroom in a way that's not too disturbing or scary, that there are ideas in that. And it's a package called, I think, Being a Language Detective.